Hello, Jamie from Inky&Scrappy back with Such a Tool series featuring ink road stamps, Such a Tool stamp set. This is the coloring video, and then I will do a simpler card towards the end. If you want to skip the coloring, zoom ahead to about the 11-minute mark. But I won't be showing the coloring in any of the future videos just because it's in this one. So, I am starting with that ink pad. So I've been struggling with my ink pad, and sometimes we forget that things that we use frequently probably need a little bit of maintenance care. And so I was like, yeah, it is time to add some ink to my Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink pad. Now, I've looked high and low to see if they have like a weight, which would be wonderful. Maybe I should weigh a new one and see what it weighs, and then when they're dry, see what it weighs. But that would mean I'd have to remember, so I should write myself a note. Anyways, so I thought I had inked it okay in the past, but it was probably back in May, and I've done a lot of stamping since then, but I also didn't smush it in very well. So I did cut out some of it because it did take me quite a bit to re-ink it. I also needed a new bottle of re-inker, which was why it probably didn't get done properly the first time. But tips that I have found: zigzag back and forth over it. You can do drops, but definitely zigzag one way, then zigzag the other way. Taking a tool like I used, I think it was the Tim Holtz tool. I think it's for the matte like scraper thing, but it scrapes. So I did a lot of pressure. I pushed it, kind of scraped the ink back and forth a couple of times, got to see the ink move on my pad, and this will help even that ink throughout the pad. The other thing that they suggest is let it rest for 10 to 15 minutes. I did not let it rest for 10 to 15 minutes. I went straight to stamping with it, and I didn't have any issues, but I think pushing it around with that hard, squeegee style thing worked really well. If you don't have one of those, if you have like a Pampered Chef scraper, like the little brown ones that comes with your stoneware, that would be another thing to try, or use an old credit card or gift card, something that's hard plastic to move it around. You could try even like your putty knife, or is it a putty knife? Your palette knife, there we go, to kind of get that ink to move and be distributed evenly throughout your ink pad. And you saw that it was a lot easier. I could do the one and done, and that's what I was like, this is like not working, and I was struggling with it so bad. And I think that was probably the biggest part of it, was making sure your ink pad is juicy. So if you usually get a new ink pad and you can do a one stamp impression, and you're finding that it takes 2 or 3 on your stamping platform to be able to get a good impression, it's probably time to ink that pad. And black is probably this one is one of my most used ones, so it's definitely, and even your colors are probably gonna, and I re-ink my Distress Oxides, probably the ones that I use more, about once a year. Sometimes you can go a little bit longer. It depends. The ones I use most, I probably re-ink, but I tend to know when those ones are dry because it takes me a lot longer to pick up color for ink blending. I tried this blend for my rust in this one. I really liked the blend that I gave in my Let's Start Stamping series. I think it was episode 20. Don't quote me on that one. I think it was episode 20. It might have been. Yeah, I think it was 20. I liked that one a little bit better. I think I used a mahogany, which is a reddish brown tone, for my darkest in that one, and I kind of liked that color blend a little bit more. And the color blend that I gave in that video was from the Oahu, which is the fine and chisel tip ones, and they're 60 and skin tone. They might have all been in the 60, to be honest. I don't remember. And so you don't need the big set to create that same look. So if that's what you're looking for, I did like that one better. But since I was trying this one, because this is the one that I thought would match best to the Copic rust that I had found online, I liked this one's color combo. I think if I'd have dropped the darkest one, even kept the darkest one and come in with a little bit lighter one, I probably could have gotten maybe a lighter copper look to it, which would have been really cool too. So I did include a little bit of coloring on the bolt here just to kind of show you. And there was another one, I can't remember which ones I did throughout this one. I wanted to do a couple of different ones for you. Doing the speckling with the rust was kind of fun. It kind of gives you that pitting look, gives you some of that texture if you're looking for that. It's kind of been one of my go-to lately. I've been loving adding texture for either fur or, of course, your rust, like the pitting in metal and stuff. It was kind of it's fairly easy to do, and it doesn't require a whole lot of blend because you really don't want it to blend. You want that pit to kind of to show up, but it's subtle and it's kind of cool, especially when your ink is already wet. It kind of just blends in for you. So for my grays here, I'm just coming in with cool grays are going to give you the most metallic look, at least in my opinion, or the most metal look. So I used cool grays. I think I did cool gray 5 and cool gray 3 for these. I kept it simple with just 2 colors and colored the rest of them that way. And then of course I did the bolts as well, so kind of doing that darker tone towards the outside, and then I'm going to come in with my lighter tone working towards the middle. So a lot of times I will do 2 colors, and then as long as you're just going, these are smaller images so you don't need as big, but the other thing is go 2 times in an area that you're trying to transition, and then keep that middle white, and then just go over it 1 time and you'll get a lighter tone without having to use all the markers. You can really get by with 1 marker color and get a lot of tone and depth and color by just layering your inks in that way. So start with where your shading would be, then come out from your shading a little bit, and then go back in with your final brush over everything. It'll give that outside a 3rd layer, the middle part a 2nd layer, and the inside part just a 1 and done, and it will give you the 3 different depths of color, and it's a lot easier to blend if you struggle with blending markers or finding markers that blend well. So if you watched, I don't know if I did not do this one like I did the color blending on my Let's Start Stamping one, I don't think. So this one I kind of stuck with a monotone or 1 color. So I went with my darker one, and then I'm just going to go with my lighter one here and just kind of go over the whole thing. And this will kind of bleed out that darker tone a little bit, and it allows a little bit of shade and shadow in there, but not a whole lot. I wanted to keep those fairly simple. Coming back in with my darkest tone to just kind of highlight those darker areas again, or those veins in this case on the dragonfly wings. Well, dragon wrench wings? Yeah, we'll go with that, maybe. And so I did do a purple tone here as well. So kind of doing that same, coming in with a darker tone of purple and then going over it with a lighter tone. Kind of in the same fashion as I did the other one. So this time I'm coming in and darkening up certain areas twice before I go over it with the lightest. This will keep those areas a little bit darker. Even by going over it with that lightest, the lightest is going to bleed out that darker color a little bit. That's kind of how alcohol markers work. So I had kind of decided, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with some of them. So for this one, I came in with that rust. I think I did this one on my Let's Start Stamping series. I just kind of came in with the rusty Hinge embossing glaze. Sorry, my words. They went bye-bye. The embossing glaze, and then I overheat it. You see, I like overheat it so bad that I almost started the paper on fire. Don't overheat it that bad, or at least don't overheat it in that area that bad. So getting yourself a VersaMark marker works really well to add some embossing powder into certain areas. So this way I could just color in my image with that embossing pen, and then I could hit it with some silver embossing powder and make that wrench look like it was metal. It was kind of fun. The other thing you can do is come in with that and of course add some embossing powder to the wings. So I used a holographic embossing powder, added that to the wings here, and then I will heat set that. Again, trying to stay a little bit further away from the paper this time and not overheat, you know, the rest. I overheated that rusty hinge to kind of make it matte. So if you overheat embossing powder, it will lose its shine, especially if it's not a matte powder. So keep that in mind. And then I did the same with some of the other wings here. doing the full ones on this one, and then I think for the last one I just did a line on part of it, so I just went over the blue part. So I did the wings on that one on my Let's Start Stamping series, which is in real time, so if you want to see that, go ahead and check that one out as well. I will link that one. I'll list it down below in the description box. So there are the completed dragonfly wrenches. And so I have everything cut out. There was a couple that I didn't color the wings because I was going to cut off the wings and kind of modify. So I wanted to put bat wings on the wrench. So if you checked out my Get Creepy on Halloween for September 2024, you got to see those bat wings. I didn't use either of the ones that I showed there, but either of those would work as well. Anything bat wing that size-wise would work well for this one. So I ran them through the Brothers Scan and Cut and cut them all out. So now it's, you know, time to get busy. So I kind of sorted them as to where I was kind of thinking, you know, which ones would go together with what, and kind of just sorting out my pieces. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with all of the nuts and bolts in this one. I kind of figured, you know, they'd be kind of spatterings throughout. Nothing too planned. And then the ones, of course, that I wanted to switch up the wings off to the side. Spoiler alert, I never actually did butterfly wings. I just couldn't find the ones that were the right size. So for this one, I'm bringing in Recollections metallic cardstock. I loved this coppery color. Of course, the coppery color goes well with that rusty or coppery colored wrench up on top there. I'm using Tim Holtz Gear 3D embossing. I think it's Gears 3D embossing folder. Ran that through my die cutting machine, and I have, you know, a beautiful 3D embossed gear panel. Now let's grunge it up a little bit. So I picked up these a while ago, and you know, for a project out in the shop, I was doing some sanding, and I was like, oh, they have Velcro back on them. They are amazing they work really well to sit, you know, stick on your little dauber, your little Velcro dauber thing, and I don't know, it just makes sanding things a lot easier. I struggle holding on to the sanding blocks. They just don't have a good grip for me. I think those things actually came with they have like a sanding block that's similar to the old Tim Holtz one that was like that rounded one, which worked really well, but I don't need it to be that big. I usually tend to use, you know, the sanding thing in a smaller sense, and so that, I think it's called Gator. I'll list it down below, but it's like Gator sanding paper, and it's got Velcro back, and it comes in multiple, you know, grits. So of course, once this is sanded, because it's got a craft core, you sand it off, and then you can come in with distressing and add that, and it's going to sit on top of the actual metallic paper, but it'll absorb into that craft cardstock, and that gives you a gorgeous distressed look, or, you know, gives you some more interest, color, and texture, depending upon how much you want to sand on it. And the sanding really didn't take very long, and, you know, so I cut this one down to 4 and I think 4 by, I end up doing 5 1/4. So 4 by 5 1/4, and then of course I have that little strip that is left. It's perfectly good and fine, so I usually save that and try to add that into the inside to kind of bring the outside in. The other thing is you can use that strip on a different card as well. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and do the sentiment on the inside right away before I get too far into it. Two reasons. If you do the sentiment first on the inside, if you mess it up, you can always flip your card around and make the front, or the inside, the front panel, which is going to get covered up anyways. And so, you know, my nanny always says, you have 2 chances. You get the inside, and then if that doesn't work, you flip it and you get a new inside. But you only get 2 chances. After that, you have to bring in another piece of paper and stamp your sentiment on there, which, you know, it's not wrong. It works as well. So I'm just going to put that scrap on the bottom here. It doesn't run all the way across. A lot of times I like to, you know, save the piece that runs all the way across, but I just left enough of a border all the way around it on, well, the 3 sides around it, so it looks equispaced. And then of course I will clean off my mat there in my desk, and then I'm going to come in with, because it's a 3D embossed folder, I like to use score tape on it. The score tape is going to stick better to any of the raised areas, and that will in turn help it stick to the card base. Also, you can see that it's bowed a little bit from the embossing. I might have used a little bit of water on it to get it to emboss well, and so this will also help hold it down flat a little bit better. A lot of times I will add glue onto the back as well. Just helps you get, if you do the glue on top of that double-sided adhesive, you have a little bit of wiggle room. Not a lot, but you get a little bit of wiggle room to line it up properly. And then, of course, in the middle part. And then a lot of times I will set a acrylic block on top to hold it down, but with that score tape, it sticks it almost immediately, and so therefore, or it sticks it immediately and as the glue dries. But a lot of times if I just use glue, putting on an acrylic block until that glue is all the way dry works very well. Now I did end up cutting out the inside of this one with a scissors. You wouldn't have to do this. I liked the option to do it this way, but you can definitely use a smaller hole punch. That would work all right as well. I do that, I do believe, in some of the future ones for them, and you know, it works. So I'm going to pop the center up on this one. Or should I pop the wings up? I don't remember. Okay, so I'm popping the wings up on this one, and I'm going to leave that center flat. So I'm going to glue the center down to my actual card on this one. And this is where I'm like, oh, I need to make sure that my center is going to actually sit on the card base and not be popped up, because I want those wings to have a little bit of height to them. It gives a little bit the illusion of, you know, them maybe flapping in the air a little bit. And at this point, I hadn't planned on adding wings on top. You know, I change my mind frequently. It happens. Because I was like, this looks way too much like the card I did for my Let's Start Stamping one. So I'm going to come in here, kind of add my flying wrench into the center, and then, yeah, I decided, you know what? I need to do some wings. So I'm coming in with I think I actually did vellum on this one. So I'm coming in with some vellum, and I really just needed it big enough to stamp the wings. Did I cut it big enough to stamp the wings? I thought I did. It was close. It wasn't exactly perfect. I'm going to come in with some Stazon black ink. I really just needed to make sure that I had the wings covered. So of course it picked up my little piece there, and I just ran my finger over it to make sure it kind of stamped better. And then I'm going to come in right away with my darker color ink on the, well, I did my lighter color, and then I'm coming in with that darker color, kind of going over it a couple of times to just kind of darken up the center area, realizing that I don't know if it was dark enough, but we called it good. Of course, putting some Stazon cleaner on my stamp right away, and then I let it sit while I cut out the wings by hand, and then of course I can just buff that off of my stamp. I don't like to let Stazon ink sit on my stamps. It's probably the only ink that I'm really good about cleaning my stamps right away. I'm not a great stamp cleaner. And so now that I have my little wings cut out, and I cut them on the line for this one, I'm just going to add a dot of glue into the center here. And then I'm coming in with my darkest marker and just kind of coloring in that little area that the wrench is, you know, sees through on that one. And then I'm going to hold it in place with my scissors just to kind of smoosh it down there. And then I will pop my wings up as it dries. And then it kind of gives that beautiful 3D wing moving effect there. And then to finish up, I wanted to add a sentiment to this one. So I'm just bringing in some light colored cardstock that kind of matches the wings on the wrench. I wanted to keep it fairly simple color-wise, and I felt using the wing color was just kind of, you know, just kind of worked. I could have gone with white or black, but I kind of liked that pop of, I think this one's Breeze cardstock from Close to My Heart. So I stamped it a couple of times, picked the one that I liked the best, and then I'm going to run that through my die cut machine after I line up my little banner die here. So I'm just going to come in with some glue and add my sentiment underneath the flying wrench there. And then, of course, I had the bolts that went with this wrench, and I could have put them with the other ones, but I thought they would be kind of fun to have them kind of falling down or around that sentiment strip there. I'm bringing in just a hole punch, like a regular hole punch, and just kind of punching the hole out of the center of the nuts here. It worked okay. I did better after the second time around, I think. Realizing that I could, not use the guide and put it above the guide, and it worked a lot better. So I'm just adding these in, kind of filling in some space from the wrench all the way down to the bottom of the card. Just kind of gives it a little bit of movement, I guess. And so there is my completed one. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I will be back with another one in this series soon. Please keep getting inky and have an amazing rest of your day. Bye!